لا يعلمون وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إن معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون أولئك الذين اشتروا والزلالات بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
نعرہ صلوات. There is still a lot of viruses going on these days for flu and RSV and also COVID. So for your own protection, if you want, you can wear a mask. Salawat. ہے علی تصویر رخت فاطمہ خاموش ہے صبر ہی میں ہے مشیت مرتضیٰ خاموش ہے بولی فضا شاہزادو مان خدمت بھی نہ لی بیٹیاں روتی کھڑی ہیں اور ماں خاموش ہے علی تصویر رخت فاطمہ خاموش ہے گر پڑے قدموں پہ جب ماں کے حسین ابن علی ہاتھ نکلے دو کفن سے اور فضا خاموش ہے ہاتھ نکلے دو کفن سے اور فضا خاموش ہے ظالموں نے ہے اذیت جیتے جی زہرا کو دی روح احمد رو رہی ہے آسیہ خاموش ہے روح احمد رو رہی ہے آسیہ خاموش ہے المدد سیدہ امداد کا یہ وقت ہے سبیہا کو بھروسہ مدعا خاموش ہے سبیہا کو بھروسہ مدعا خاموش ہے علی تصویر رخت فاطمہ خاموش ہے صلوات
حبیب خدا ختم الانبیاء باواز بلند صلوات. ہمارے دیگر صلوات. صرف 2 مصرے فضائل کے، اس کے بعد ذکر مصائب. ایک مرتبہ اور بلندتر صلوات پڑھیں. صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. جو پوچھئے کہ کیا ہے فاطمہ، جو پوچھئے کہ کیا ہے فاطمہ، حجاب کبریائی ہے، حجاب کبریائی ہے، کسی کی کب رسائی ہے، کہ پردہ خدا ہے فاطمہ، کہ پردہ خدا ہے فاطمہ. کیا ہے فاطمہ؟ جو پنجتن سمٹ گئے تو ایک ذات بن گئی، وہ ایک ذات پھیل کر یہ کائنات بن گئی. نبی کی ذات بن گئی، علی کی ذات بن گئی، پتا چلا کہ کیا ہے فاطمہ. کرم کی انتہا ہے فاطمہ. کون ہے یہ پاک بی بی؟ کرم کی انتہا ہے فاطمہ. آیا ہے وہ، نہا ہے وہ، زماں ہے وہ، مقام ہے وہ، صدائے کر فتح ہے وہ، جہاں خدا وہاں ہے وہ. زمیں ہے آدمی کی ماں، زمیں ہے آدمی کی ماں، زمین کی بھی ماں ہے وہ، کہ فاطر السما ہے فاطمہ، کہ فاطر السما ہے فاطمہ. صلوات پڑھیں محمد وآل محمد. عزت جو بڑی تھی تو مصیبت بھی بڑی تھی. کس طرح بستر سے تھر تھرا کے اٹھی تھام کر سا، قبر نبی پہ فاتحہ آخری پڑھا، ہمسائیوں کے گھر گئیں، رخصت کر کہا لو صاحبوں بہتر ہے اب کوچ میرا، ایذا دی تم سبھوں کو میرے شور و شین سے، کل فاطمہ نہ ہوے گی تم سونا چین سے. سن لو وصیت میری اس وقت یا امام، فضا سے میرے بعد عدالت سے لینا کام. ہوشیار فاطمہ کی امانت سے صبح ہو شام، دو بیٹیاں دو بیٹے ہیں اور بس خدا کا نام. میں نے بڑے دکھوں سے سب بچے پالے ہیں رب کے حوالے تم یہ تمہارے حوالے ہیں تو ناگاہ شور اٹھا کے زہرا گزر گئیں امامہ سر سے پھینک کے روئے ماں میں دین روتی تھی مل کے زینب و کلثوم تھی قریب اور دور تھے حسین جو آتے نہ تھے قریب فضا پکاریاں یہاں کیا نہ آئیں گے بولے حسین اماں بلائیں گی تو جائیں گے تو ٹوٹے بندے کفن فاطمہ کے اور پھر ہاتھ نکلے کفن سے آئی آواز آئے حسین ماں بلاتی ہے آئے حسین.
Assalamu alaikum. We want to welcome Maulana Sayyid Sulaiman Hassan Abidi to Zainabia Center. Thank you so much for coming at such a short notice. There's a sad news. Father of Batul, sister Batul, and Elia has passed away today. His name was Sayyid Hashim Ali Kazmi. He was also my professor of pathology at Dow Medical College. People who know Dow Medical College in Pakistan. Please recite a Surah Fatiha.
Assalamu alaikum. First and foremost, just want to thank Sayyid Sulaiman for coming and visiting us at Zainabia Center of Michigan and giving a majlis in honor of the Lady of Light, Sayyidah Fatimah Zahra Salam ala alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just wanted to make a quick announcement that there will be a Q&A here in the main hall right after Matam. So whoever with Sayyid Sulaiman, so whoever wants to attend that, they're more than welcome to. But with that all being said, I'd like to invite Sayyid Sulaiman to the minbar with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It is an honor to be in your presence, to remember, to commemorate, and to shed tears for the suffering and the oppression of the beloved daughter of our Prophet, the mother of our Imams, and in particular the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi. May Allah hasten his reappearance. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the one person who was the closest to our Prophet and the only person who could be a spouse and an equal to Imam Ali, Lady Fatimatu Zahra, Salamullahi alayha. Salawat ala Muhammad. Before I begin today's Majlis, I would like to request a Fatiha for the following marhumin, sponsors of today's program, and their deceased family members. I will recite the names and then we will do dua and recite Surah Al-Fatiha for them. Muhammad Baqir Kirmani, Khadija Kirmani, Abbas Kirmani, Tayyaba Parveen Kirmani, Muhammad Ja'far Lari, Kazim Begum, Sayyid Nasir Abbas Jafri, Sayyida Shamshad Fatima, Sayyid Mustafa Akbar, Sayyid Abbas Akbar, Sayyid Nurul Hassan Ja'fari, Sabiha Ja'fari, Badrul Hassan Ja'fari, the marhumin of Abbas and Sayyida Jafri, their family, and for all of your marhumin and marhumat, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate their ranks and to grant them the company of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad in paradise. Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for your marhumin and for the marhumin whose names I mentioned after Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Once again, please recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today, we are gathered here to remember the martyrdom of the one person whose struggle and whose life encapsulates many of the fundamental teachings of Islam. Generally, when we think of imamat, we associate imamat, of course, with Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, who is our first imam. We associate imamat with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi wa ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salam because he is the one who Allah had appointed inni ja'iluka linnasi imama, as an imam and as a leader of humanity. And our own Prophet and the Imams who came after our Prophet, they were Imams, leaders of humanity, as heirs of the message and the position of Imamat that was given to Prophet Ibrahim. So we remember our 12 Imams, we remember the first of the 12 Imams, we remember the source of Imamat who was Prophet Ibrahim, but the one person that can give us a very direct and complete understanding of imamat is the daughter of the Prophet Fatimatu Zahra alayha salam. Salawat ala Muhammad. And that is what I would like to discuss in the brief time that we have. And inshallah, if there are any questions, then after the completion of the majlis, we will have an opportunity for questions and inshallah, brief answers, so we can understand the legacy and the teachings of Sayyida Fatima to the best of our ability, with our limited understanding and our limited intellect. Why is it that we would say that Sayyida Fatima is a reminder of the reality and the essence of imamat? Well, that is because Allah had decreed for this ummah to go through different tests. Generally speaking, most people, we make this mistake that when things are going our way, we think that they're going to continue to go our way. Sometimes when people, they earn their first paycheck, and generally they don't yet have many expenses, so they think that money is something that it comes easily, and they might all of a sudden upgrade their life, eat out every day, buy whatever impulse they have, and they think that, well, inshallah, I'll be able to earn and I'll be able to pay off whatever debt I may put on my credit card, and I won't have any difficulty. They don't realize that sometimes there are days of hardship just like they are days of ease. Most of us, when we are young, we take unreasonable risks with our diet, with our health, with our driving, because we feel we are invincible, even if we know in our mind that we are mortal. And we know maybe even personally people who did die young. But still there is that emotional and that visceral sense that I'm not going to die anytime soon. And if somebody dies young, we say that they died before their time. But there is no such thing as somebody living past their time or somebody dying before their time, because no death is a coincidence. Every death is decreed by Allah in His infinite wisdom and power. Nothing is an accident, and nobody's decree overtakes Allah and therefore is enforced to the objection of the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So nothing happens outside of its time. Nobody dies too soon or past their time. But when we are earning a good amount, then we generally don't plan for hardship. When we are healthy, we generally don't realize that there might be times of hardship and difficulty as well. And therefore, it is often a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He gives you a little bit of a taste of difficulty before you have the worst test or the full test of your faith and your abilities. Because it gives you a chance to discover your inner strength and discover what you need to do in order to be able to succeed. One of the worst things that a parent can do for their children is to spoil their children and meet their every need before the child has had a chance to think about and to plan for their own needs. Now, some parents, they go to the opposite extreme and they leave their children to their own devices, and that is also not healthy and not constructive. The parent should be there to give guidance, to give advice as the children now enter into early adulthood and adulthood. The parent should be there as a sounding board, as a guide, as a safety in case the child begins to go in a destructive or an immature direction due to their lack of experience. But the parent should let the child think and plan and within the oversight of the parent, even make mistakes, so that the child learns to motivate and to plan and to think for him or herself. And that's not just when our children are 18 or 19, or when they graduate from college. Some parents say that, yes, we'll do that when our children are 30. Then we'll let them make their own decision about what groceries to buy. We're speaking about even when our children are 13 and 14. In our own families, how many of us can relate to this habit where a child is baligh, but they don't wake up for Fajr? Maybe they don't even set their own alarm, because the parents are going to wake them up. A child that doesn't wake up for Fajr on their own volition when they are 13 or 14 will probably not wake up for Fajr on their own when they are 18. It will still be the knock on the door, the first knock, the second knock, the third knock that is also with a stern voice. And then the child will say that, all right, there's 5 minutes left until sunrise, now I need to pray. And the problem is that then that child will go to college, or that child will have an internship, or that child will move to another city, and they're now 19, they're 20, they're 22, but they have never learned to set their own alarm and to set their own bedtime, because their decision making and their sense of responsibility and guilt has always been outsourced to the parent. So a lesson that they should have learned when they were 13 or 14, it isn't going to be learned until they are 18 or even older. A delayed adulthood and a delayed maturity. It's far better for the parent to say at 10 o'clock p.m. when the child is 13, that plan your bedtime, because if you sleep late, then you're not going to be able to wake up for Fajr. Remind the child at night, set your alarm, because you're responsible. If you are baligh, then it is your responsibility to determine when you need to sleep. I should know my body. I should know my personality. Some people, they can sleep at 2 a.m., but they have a set time when they will wake up. Other people, if they are delayed by half an hour when they go to sleep, then they're going to wake up half an hour later than they otherwise would, regardless of whether there is an alarm or not. I should get to know that, and my parents should help me discover what is my personality, what will my body do, what are my strengths and my weaknesses, so that then I regulate myself and I set my bedtime. And I set the time when I am going to wake up, and maybe sometimes I don't set my alarm because I forget. Or I set my alarm and I don't wake up because I hit snooze before I'm fully alert. But let me make that mistake when I am 14. Let me make that mistake when I am 13. Let me make that mistake when I am just entering into adulthood, so that I can learn from it, and then I develop the sense of responsibility that my prayer, not just Fajr, but to remember Dhuhr and Asr as well, Maghrib and Isha as well, paying my khums. This is my responsibility. My parents can remind me, they can guide me, they can help me prepare and discipline myself, but it is not them that I owe my religious obligation to, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is my own self and my own soul. So to put that responsibility on your child before they are out on their own in the earth, separate from their parents, that is not a test. That is not a hardship that you are placing upon them. It is an opportunity and it is a benefit. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the same thing is true of Islam. Allah put certain tests, certain opportunities in the life of this ummah, so that it isn't just automatic. for a person to accept Islam. Allah could have made it easier for people to accept the mission of the Prophet. He could have arranged circumstances in such a way that the excuses that people had, those excuses would not have been there. But then the faith that would result would not have had the same value. So Allah gave some tests. One example is that people came and they demanded from the Prophet certain miracles. They said that we have heard from the rabbis and from Christian priests, and we have heard from the stories that the Prophet himself taught from the Quran, that there were miracles like those miracles given to Prophet Saleh, to Prophet Hud, to Prophet Musa, to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And they would say that, O Messenger, if you claim to be a messenger of the same God who sent those prophets, then bring us the same kind of miracles that they brought. Now, had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grown old and retired? And he said that we've moved on to a different season and we're not going to go back to the plot of the previous episodes. Times have changed. Allah has grown bored of sending those miracles, or he forgot how he did it. Nothing has changed in terms of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do. It hasn't become more difficult. It hasn't become boring. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want to give people that miracle upon their demand. Then it wouldn't be a miracle that would give them guidance. It would just be a statement to silence somebody. The result would have been that they would not have had an answer, but they wouldn't have had faith. That is also why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes does not answer our du'as in the way that we may ask them. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You may have sometimes experienced this or heard this. A person says that I'm going to give a dedicated worship to Allah so that I can get a specific haja that I have. I'll go for ziyarah. I'll give sadaqah. I will recite a certain dua for maybe 40 days in a row because I have a specific need from Allah. And sometimes when we don't get that need fulfilled, then we feel as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ignored us. We may feel let down. We may feel like we are not motivated to do dua again. But one of the reasons, and there are many reasons, in one hadith, it is said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes delays fulfilling a dua because he says to his angels that my servant now has a haja, so they speak to me more frequently. So I have decreed that this need is going to be fulfilled, but delay it so that he or she keeps talking to me and continues that relationship. And another reason why Allah sometimes delays that prayer is that if it is answered right away, then it might actually become a danger to my faith. Let me give you an example that I have personally experienced, meaning I've seen it. A person had a very big decision in their life and they did istikhara. And the istikhara came out negative, and so they didn't participate in that decision that they were thinking of. Other people did. And it turned out to be a catastrophe. So what did the istikhara do? It saved that person from that catastrophe. But you know what else it did? It made that person afraid to even open a door without doing istikhara. Because psychologically they said, if I hadn't done the istikhara at that time, what would have happened? I would have suffered like they suffered. Now, the person had aql. The person had an intellect. They had experience. They had other people that they could consult with and get information. All of that is forgotten. Now, Should I go out to eat or should I eat at home? Istikhara. Should I sign up for the 8 a.m. class or the 9 a.m. class? Istikhara. Should I make this decision or that decision? Once you've had an immediate result, what happens? Is it a benefit or a harm? It's a benefit in that Allah has protected you from that catastrophe. But if it's going to make you lose your gratitude to Allah that He gave you an intellect, if it's going to make you lose your trust in your friends and in your fellow believers that Allah Himself has told you to consult with, then it isn't a benefit. You made one small profit and you will suffer many more losses if you ignore your intellect, you ignore the friends and the experienced elders that you should consult with, and you say that now everything is going to be istikhara. That is a lack of gratitude for the favors and the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. The logic of our Imams was different. Imam Ali says, عرفت ربي بفسخ العزائم ونقض الهمم وحل العقول. That I make a plan and Allah changes my plan. And that's how I recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I make a plan and Allah allows it to take place, then it is Allah that allows it to reach its conclusion. But you don't see the hand of Allah because you were planning it anyway. But when Allah takes it away, let me just give a hypothetical example to make the point clear. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah says that our rizq is guaranteed and determined by Allah. So what is going to come to us, it's not something that will ever be taken away from us through any circumstance beyond the control of Allah. But for believers, Allah says that I am not going to give you your rizq from where you expect. I'm going to give you the same rizq that you had earned, but not through your earning. Because I want you to see my hand. Now, if, for example, I enter into a business transaction and I'm planning to profit, say, $5,000 from that transaction. I'm selling something, I'm performing a service, whatever it might be. If I plan to earn $5,000 in the course of that transaction over a number of days or weeks or months, and I perform that transaction, and then I earn $5,000. Is that my earning? The ability to plan, the knowledge, the health, the peace of mind. If I received an education that allowed me to have the skills needed, the ability to have that education, all of those circumstances from the beginning until the end, from the moment I took my first breath in this world until the moment that I made the decision that is going to give me that profit. All of it is through the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala huwa awla bihasanatikum minkum. Whatever good you do, Allah deserves more of the credit because He is the one who created you and allowed you and facilitated all of those things. So it is the hand of Allah. But because I was working for it and I was planning it, I don't always see the hand of Allah. It's there, but I don't see it. But what happens if Allah said that you were decreed to get $5,000 from this transaction? But I'm going to arrange your affairs such that you don't earn any profit. None at all. And then a week later, somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arranges for me to earn $5,000, maybe in a way that I didn't expect. Now, it's much easier for me to see that this came from Allah. It wasn't through my earning. It wasn't through my planning. It wasn't because I got an education and I worked hard and therefore I earned it. And so spiritually and psychologically, I'm much more likely to give the credit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ali is not saying that Allah gave it to you when you didn't plan for it, and He didn't give it to you when you did plan for it. I hope that point is clear. the intervention of Allah is equal in both cases. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the only one that has authority in heavens and earth. Whether it be my plan that goes through, or whether my plan doesn't go through, the intervention of Allah is equal. But the intervention of Allah is not equally visible in both cases. Where is it most visible? It is most visible when I plan something and it doesn't go through, and then Allah gives me that same thing or something better through a different means. عرفت ربي بفسخ العزائم. My plan doesn't go through, and the hand of Allah is visible. And so I make a dua, and then Allah doesn't give it to me right away because He wants me to realize that I am not the king asking my servant Allah to give me what I want. I said this dua, I said salawat at the beginning, I said salawat at the end. Allah, you owe this to me. He wants it to be a relationship of love. He wants it to be a petition. He wants it to be the servant remembering and asking and becoming more and more cognizant and aware of our dependence on His grace. And that is why those hajat that He wishes to grant, He may delay the fulfillment, or He may fulfill them in an unexpected way so that we can see that it is through His grace and His mercy, not because He owes it to us because of our worship or because of our dua. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So what does all of this have to do with Sayyidah Fatimah Zahra salamullahi alayha? Well, let us now bring ourselves to the topic that we are here to remember, whether it be the miracles that people demanded of the Prophet or the du'as that we make, and sometimes we place a demand on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was another expectation that people had from the Prophet, which is that if they're going to say no to their family and their traditions and their parents and their religion and their traditions, then they don't want to do it for a religion that's going to be here today and forgotten tomorrow. And so they often came to the Prophet and they said that you don't even have a son. Who's going to carry on your religion and your mission after you if you don't have a son? So this was one obstacle to the success of the preaching of the Prophet, especially in the early days in Mecca. It wasn't just Al-As ibn Wa'il, but it was many of the people of Quraysh. They were making a calculation. They were saying, on the one hand, we have our families, we have our city, we have our relatives, we have our traditions, we have all of the Arabs that honor us as the custodians of the Kaaba. And on the other hand, we have this one person, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and he doesn't even have a son. Who's going to remember him, and who's going to carry on his religion after him? And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to just make it one step easier for them to become Muslims, He could have given the Prophet a son. That son doesn't have to be the Imam. That son doesn't have to be the successor. Even the existence of that son would just make it easier for people to say, all right, this religion has a future. Let me listen to what this person is saying. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave the Prophet sons. Before the prophetic mission, Qasim, and towards the end of the prophetic mission, Ibrahim. And according to different narrations, a number of sons between them. There is a difference of opinion about the exact number of sons that were born to the Prophet. But both earlier in his life and later in his life, sons were born to the Prophet, but they did not survive past childhood. Because it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying, I'm not going to make it easy for you. If you want to accept Islam because you think this religion has a future through a son and a successor, then don't enter into this religion. If you're going to invest in this transaction because of the material circumstances, then you are not worthy of Islam. I'm not going to make it easy for you. And in Surah Al-Ahzab, verse number 40, it is almost as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taunting the people. مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رِجَالِكُمْ. Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. And that taunt is to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the Prophet something better than to be the father of one of your men. وَلَكِنْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Allah knows what He is doing. Allah knows everything. He withheld men to be the offspring of the Prophet because that would just be an excuse for people to look at the outward success of the mission of the Prophet. And وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Allah knew that this would make people Muslims for the wrong reasons. He said, I'm not going to give the Prophet a son. And so when I said that the nature of imamat, it came through the daughter of the Prophet, Fatimah Zahra, salamullahi alayha salawatullah. This is what I was referring to. That the nature of imamat and the nature of wilayat is the heart of Islam. And if the Prophet had a son, it may have been a distraction for people because they would have looked at it like a king inheriting a kingdom, a prince inheriting outward authority from a previous ruler or king or sovereign. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want people to think of Islam in that way. And one of the best ways to do that, and the way that Allah chose for our Prophet, is to say you are not going to have a son. People think if you have a son, then your name will carry on. Your memory will carry on. Your business or your values or your teachings will carry on. But you are Rasulullah wa Khatam al-Nabiyyin, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the Prophet Kawthar. He has given him abundant good in the person of his daughter Fatimah Zahra. She is now the one who is not just an abundant good, but she is going to be the one to tell the people and show the people what was wrong with their expectation that Islam only has a future if you have a son. By showing them that the future of Islam is through the spirit and the purity and the purification of a believer. And that is what the daughter of the Prophet represented. And through that message, that is how she set the framework and the ground for the struggle of all 12 of our Imams, from Imam Ali alayhi salam to Imam Mahdi, may Allah hasten his appearance. Sallu ala Muhammad. So in other words, people sometimes talk about toxic masculinity, and sometimes what they think of as toxic is not actually toxic, it's chivalry and it's something constructive, and there are other aspects of it that are toxic. But what is truly toxic is to think that success and victory and triumph, they come from material means. And in the society of Arabia at that time, when you thought of material means, it means that you are always going to prefer sons over daughters, because sons generally would be of greater economic benefit and greater military benefit when you might be under attack. So if you think of your future in material means, then in that era, you are going to prefer sons. This might not be the case today because our society and our economic relationships have changed. There still will be misplaced priorities today as well through a materialistic mindset. But certainly in Arabia, a daughter is a liability. If I enter into warfare with another tribe, then she can be taken captive, and then I have to worry about her safety, and I may have to ransom her, and then I will have to take care of her throughout different stages of her life, make sure that she is married and make sure that she is safe. A son is not a liability. A son is going to earn, a son is going to protect, and so he is valuable. But the problem is not masculinity or toxic masculinity or patriarchy. That's just the symptom. What is the problem? The problem is a material view of what is going to be economically to my benefit, socially to my benefit. And that will lead me in one era to prefer sons. In another era, it might mean that I prefer to have a daughter. In another era, it might mean that it doesn't matter whether I have children or I just choose to have a pet, but it's whatever my whim may desire. In our era, that is the challenge. It's not that people prefer sons or that people prefer daughters. It's that they prefer whatever they want. And so they will delay marriage, or they will delay having children, or they will decide whether to do one thing or another thing based on their whim and not based on the question, how can I serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala best? But the source, don't look at the symptom, that it's patriarchy or it's one toxic ideology or another. Look at the root cause. That root cause is to think that your success in life comes from your material circumstances. And the existence of Sayyida Fatimah al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha, sallu ala Muhammad. That was the way in which Allah reminded humanity, not just through the words of the Prophet or the words of the Quran, but through the lived experience of our Prophet. That if having a son was more valuable, then nobody was more beloved to the Creator than his Prophet, Muhammad Mustafa. But if your legacy depends on having somebody to carry on your last name, then nobody's legacy was more important to Allah than the legacy of the Prophet. But Allah wants us to recognize that it is your purity and it is your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is going to carry your legacy. If you have children, then look at their spiritual potential and not their material intelligence or potential. And if you don't have children, then don't think that all is lost, because you can still carry a spiritual message and teach your nephews, your nieces, the children and the next generation of your community and your ummah, and they will carry on your legacy. And it was not just our Prophet, but it was also a sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the previous prophets. According to a hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, there is a prayer made by Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And before I mention the hadith, I want to mention the context. There comes a time when we might be embarrassed to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something. Let's say, for example, that I get into a terrible accident and one of my family members is injured and there is very little hope for their recovery. I pray to Allah and then a miracle comes and they recover. Then they fall sick to some other illness and they are on the verge of death. And I pray to Allah to give them health, and then once again He restores them to health. A time will come when if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fulfilled those prayers miraculously, then I should say that I'm embarrassed to keep on asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the end, Allah has decreed death for everybody. And so I shouldn't be surprised if those miraculous interventions, they come to an end. Prophet Ibrahim had two sons, and both of those sons were prophets. Ismail was the ancestor of our prophet, and the 12 imams and the promised one who is going to fill the entire world with justice, the awaited one of all of the prophets and all of humanity from the very first human being, who will fulfill all of the messages that the prophets brought and all of the sacrifices that the martyrs made. From the very first martyr Habil to the martyrs of our own era who stand against the tyrants of their time and give their lives for the love of Allah and the love of Ahlul Bayt and for the love of justice. Ismail has that legacy. And Ishaq is a prophet and the father of Yaqub, who is the father of Yusuf, a line of 4 prophets in a row. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given Prophet Ibrahim 2 sons who were ma'soom, who were prophets, and who each were the source of a beautiful legacy of prophethood and leadership and guidance that survives until our time and that will survive until the very last human being walks on this earth. And yet, after having been given these 2 great gifts in old age, through a miracle of Allah and not through a normal birth, our 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, says, إن إبراهيم سأل ربه أن يرزقه ابنة تبكيه وتندبه بعد موته. Prophet Ibrahim asked Allah to give him a daughter who will cry for him and remember him after his death. And the question that comes to my mind is, would Ismail not remember his father after his death? He's a prophet. Is he going to say, all right, my father is dead. Now I'm going to move on? If he were going to do that, then he wouldn't have been willing to sacrifice himself for the dream that his father saw. And he wouldn't be named Dhabihullah, and he wouldn't be worthy of a prophethood and being the ancestor of our own prophet. Would Ishaq forget Prophet Ibrahim? Would he not cry? Would he not remember? Of course. As a ma'soom and as a prophet, he would do so. But Prophet Ibrahim here is establishing a sunnah. And it is the sunnah of our prophets to ask Allah for a daughter. And it is the sunnah of Allah to give those who are the most beloved in His eyes a daughter. And Prophet Ibrahim's prayer is not an emotional prayer, but it is a prayer rooted in tawheed and knowledge of Allah. When he says that I ask Allah for a daughter so that my legacy and my name will live, it's not that Prophet Ibrahim wants her to cry for him as a person, but she wants him to remember, and through her tears and through her grief and remembrance, pass on the name and the legacy of Prophet Ibrahim. Because that is something that a daughter can do. And when she grows as a woman and she becomes a mother, she becomes a sister, she becomes an aunt, she can do in a way that is far more powerful and far more meaningful than even a prophet can do and a ma'soom can do as a man. That's not a limitation on the part of Ismail or Ishaq alayhim as-salam. But still, Prophet Ibrahim, according to the teaching of our 6th Imam, made that prayer because there is something special about the emotional and spiritual connection that a daughter has to her parents, and the potential that she has to strengthen and carry on a legacy within a family. Now, there's always human variation. Not every daughter will be able to do that, and not every son will fall short. And we're not speaking or denying that human variation. There are many women that are much more athletic than I am, in fact, probably most of them, but that doesn't mean that the average is not true, that generally men are faster or stronger than women. I am not a good example of athletic ability. So when we speak about that potential We are not speaking about one example that you can think of that is the opposite. But we are speaking of that potential that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created within human society. And it was the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have his prophets pray for daughters. And it was his sunnah for our prophet to give him a daughter exclusively in order to establish that the foundation of imamat is not the political authority of Imam Ali. It isn't the sword of Imam Ali. His authority doesn't come from Zulfaqar. His authority comes from Ayatul Tathir. And sometimes we as a Shia, we also do an injustice to Ahlul Bayt. When we talk about the battles of Imam Ali, more than we talk about the worship and the humility and the sincerity and the purity of Imam Ali. So imagine, if we who are devotees of Imam Ali, if we who pride in Nahjul Balagha and in the munajat and in the du'as of Ahlul Bayt, many of us recite Dua Kumail every week, which is a dua taught by Imam Ali to his companion Kumail ibn Ziyad al-Nakha'i. If even we can sometimes fall prey to this misunderstanding that the honor of Islam and the protection of Islam came through the battles and the heroism of Imam Ali in Badr and Uhud and Khandaq and Khaybar, then imagine those people who don't know the sermons of Nahjul Balagha and haven't read Dua Kumail and don't know Ahlul Bayt so closely. Imagine how many mistakes and how many misunderstandings they may have. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave his prophet Fatimatu Zahra sallallahu alayha, salawatullah, he tells the entire ummah of all schools of thought that the continuity of the mission of the prophet is through his daughter. The continuity of the mission of his prophet is through those attributes that are represented in Fatimatu Zahra. Don't consider them feminine attributes because she is not a role model for women. Consider them inherent Islamic attributes because it is through her and through her values and through her teaching and through her upbringing that Ahlul Bayt were able to give their knowledge and their courage and their sacrifice at every stage and in every generation whenever Islam needed it. And so Islam is, in essence, the manifestation of the personality and the values of the daughter of the Prophet. And that is one of the layers of the meaning of the famous prophetic hadith, فاطمة بضعة مني فمن آذاها فقد آذاني ومن سرها فقد سرني. The daughter of the Prophet is a part of the Prophet. If you want to know what is pleasing to Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, you only need to look to the pleasure of his daughter Fatima. And if you want to know what is displeasing to the Prophet, then you only need to look to the displeasure of his daughter Fatima because she is Muhammad and the values of Muhammad in her own existence and in her own values. And it is through her that the foundation of imamat was established, which is going to provide salvation and the eradication of evil and injustice from humanity according to God's promise. And that is why the tragedy of Fatimatu Zahra is so great, because it was as if Prophet Muhammad died twice in just the space of a few weeks. And look at it from the perspective of Imam Ali and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum. Their tears had not yet died after the death of their grandfather, the Prophet, when once again tragedy struck their home and they lost their beloved mother. You can imagine the attachment that this daughter of the Prophet had to her father, that there is nothing more precious to a mother of young children than her children. She can forget her own health. She can forget her own safety. She can forget her own needs. She can forget everything in existence to have even a moment of time with her children. But after the death of the Prophet, Lady Fatima was not seen laughing or smiling for a single moment. And even when her children would come to her without telling them that she was going to die soon, she would be preparing them for the stage when she would no longer be with them. When Imam Hassan would come, she would prepare him for his sacrifice. When Imam Hussein would come, sometimes she would say, "No, my son Hussein, that I am never going to leave your side." Imam Hussein was a young boy of 5 or 6 years of age. He would have said that, "Oh, my mother, of course, you have always been by my side, and I know that you will always be by my side." But what Lady Fatima meant was something else. She was not speaking that she would be there to feed him or to clothe him or to bathe him as a child. Lady Fatima was saying that, "Oh Hussein, no, 50 years from now, when the time comes for you to depart from Medina, you will come to my grave and you will shed tears and you will bid farewell to your mother. Oh Hussein, you will bid farewell to Fatima, but Fatima will not bid farewell to you. You will go from Medina to Mecca. She will go on that journey with you. You will go towards Iraq. She will be with you on that journey. And when you reach Karbala, you will be setting up the tents, and Lady Fatima will be walking in the battlefield, looking to see where there is a thorn on the ground or where there is a stone. And she will be doing her ibadah and praying to Allah that, "Oh Allah, this is where you have decreed that my beloved Hussein will breathe his final breaths." Lady Fatima, she was preparing Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein for the sacrifices of their lives. Imagine now when Lady Fatima would see her daughter Zainab in those final weeks of her life. The daughter of the Prophet was mourning the death of her father, the beloved Prophet of Allah, the mercy to mankind. She was mourning the deprivation and the oppression of her Imam, Amir al-Mu'mineen. She was also suffering her own injuries. But when Lady Zainab came to her, Lady Fatima modeled courage, and she would suppress her own injury and her own tears. And she would say to her daughter that when calamity strikes, you are to show courage. Oh, my daughter Zainab, when my mother Khadija died, then it was I, as a young girl of 6 years of age, who would cover the injuries of my father, and I offered him consolation. Zainab, your mother may not survive for much longer. Just like your grandfather, the Prophet, needed me to console him. Your father, Imam Ali, will need your strength to be by his side. When your father will leave his house in Medina, nobody will say salam to him. And if Imam Ali will say salam to people, they will turn their faces away from him and they will not even reply to him. Oh Zainab, when your father is alone, then console him and protect him as I did for my father when he was alone in Mecca. How little times had changed. And then Lady Fatima would say to her daughter that, "Oh, my daughter Zainab, after you have reached adulthood, then there will be another mission where you are going to carry on my legacy. And your courage will save Islam. After the battle of Karbala, there will be a battle in the court of Ibn Ziyad, and there will be a battle in the court of Yazid. Zainab, that is when you will stand of a tyrant, and you will protect the legacy of the Prophet as I defended Imamat in the court of the tyrant of my time. Lady Zainab, she was prepared for the ultimate struggle. Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Kulthum, they were prepared for the ultimate struggle that they were going to perform in their time. One final reminder. This is after Lady Fatima had been martyred, when Imam Ali was washing the body of the daughter of the Prophet. She had suffered much. She had been injured. She was weak. In her final moments, she was not even able to stand up and offer her prayers. She would offer her prayers sitting down. But she shielded even Imam Ali from the extent of her suffering. It is said that when Imam Ali was washing the body of Lady Fatima for preparation for burial, in the course of that washing at one time, he let out a cry and turned towards the heavens, and then turned towards the grave of the Prophet. Imam Ali said that, "Oh my beloved, oh Rasulullah, even I did not know the extent of the injuries that Lady Fatima suffered. She showed strength with me so that I would not have more grief than I did. Oh my brother Rasulullah, I am returning the daughter that you entrusted to my care back to you. She is injured. Ask her what befell her at the hands of those who call themselves your followers. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Oh Allah, we ask you to accept these tears and this remembrance on our behalf. Oh Allah, we follow the Islam of Lady Fatima, the Islam of Ahlul Bayt, the Islam of inner purification and not just outward obedience. Oh Allah, grant us the grace and the intercession of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Grant us the love of these noble personalities for our hearts, and make it the inheritance that we give to our children and our children's children until the day of judgment. O Allah, gladden the heart of Lady Fatima and our hearts and the hearts of all believers through the appearance of the Imam of our time, and allow us to serve as his obedient soldiers and further his mission. O Allah, we ask you to make the end of our affairs be your forgiveness and your grace, and grant us the company of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad for all eternity. Sallu ala Muhammad.
Just a quick announcement. We will be limiting Matam to just 2 no-hit, just so we have time for the Q&A with Sayyid Sulaiman. Yeah, Matam Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Zahara.